When it comes to economic hardship, Mzansi doesn't need any help from COVID-19. We've been having it.
South Africa is once again in a recession,
with some issues more critical than others.
Rolling blackouts had a negative impact on South Africa's economy.
Load shedding is crippling the economy.
So when COVID-19 completely exposed how fragile global economies are,
the record-shattering 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits.
It became clear that South Africa was going to feel the pain as well.
The country's economy shrank by a staggering 51%.
But the coronavirus has also paused the world, giving us time to reflect on what a post-COVID-19 world could look like, one that makes our economies, societies, and environment more resilient. With President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing some promising developments in his post-COVID economic recovery plan, there seems to be some light on the horizon. So how can South Africa address both our electricity and economic crises going forward? Let's get aware. While the virus has taken a number of lives, since South Africa instituted a nationwide lockdown, our economy has been absolutely hammered.
The country now has a junk rating from all three major international rating agencies.
The pandemic has impoverished South Africa and made one of the world's most unequal countries even more so.
Unemployment in South Africa has hit a record high.
Tough time never lasts. Only tough people last.
But tough times may last, at least for an estimated 3 million South Africans who have lost their jobs since lockdown began. But let's just pause here to remember that long before COVID-19 was destroyer-in-chief, South Africa's state-owned power utility, Eskom, was dragging our economy down for the last decade.
That South Africa could face the worst recorded load shedding for 2020.
It costs between 5 and 6 billion rand per day.
Another week and another threat of blackouts.
Certainly for the next 18 months, there are going to be times when we are as constrained as we are now.
There will never be a load shedding again.
Eskom shut off power to various parts of the country.
South Africa's flagging power grid is yet again under threat.
God, what's all this?
So how has Eskom coped with the last few months? Well, I'm pleased to report that Eskom had a surplus of energy and enough time to conduct all backlog maintenance, so that load shedding has become a thing of the past, is what I wish I could say.
Hello, darkness, that suggests that load shedding in some form is back for some.
Eskom is warning that the power grid is under.
So maybe now is a good time to mention that this episode is about the future of the electric grid. But if you want to learn more about the numerous issues that have plagued Eskom until now, watch our previous episodes that explain the financial and environmental failings of the state utility. In an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if we were able to address the electricity crisis and tackle our economic, social, and environmental problems in a way that doesn't put the taxpayer at risk? Apparently, there is.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
What South Africa should be considering is a Green New Deal.
The green thing.
So what is a Green New Deal?
Sounds like socialism to me!
First, a quick recap of what the original New Deal was, and let's see if any of this sounds vaguely familiar. The New Deal was a US economic policy used to respond to the Great Depression of the 1930s.
Hunger drove our people to the breadlines.
Thousands of people lined up for nearly 2.5 miles for emergency food parcels in the South African city of Centurion on Wednesday.
With millions out of work.
Without jobs, we had no money.
A record number of people looking for jobs.
The US President Franklin D. Roosevelt launched a number of programs to provide relief and help the economy recover.
You've got a president now. He gave the land a new deal.
This plan had 3 pillars: relief, reform, and recover. And it's the recovery aspect of the 3 R's that included the temporary employment of 4 million people to build bridges, roads, dams, and electricity infrastructure. But why should a South African New Deal be green? Is it because of the environment? Actually, it seems like that is merely a bonus.
That's an understatement.
In reality, there are overwhelming financial, technical, and practical reasons. What we first need to understand is how we decide on which energy technologies to use. To do this, there are 3 needs that need to be met: Those are: 1. It needs to be added to the grid quickly. 2. It must meet the electricity demands of South Africa. There should be enough and it should be reliable. And 3, it should be done as cheaply as possible. So let's go through each of these. We already know that building large coal-fired power stations is not our strong point. Here's a short throwback to our previous explainer.
Called Medupi and Kusile, basically everything started going wrong from the moment they started building these power stations. The 150 billion rand budget quickly skyrocketed by 150 billion rand more.
Medupi and Kusile were badly designed and badly constructed.
And unless you want another decade of load shedding,
No!
large nuclear power plants simply take too long to build and are almost always over budget.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But how quickly can we add renewable energy to the grid? To learn more, we spoke to Jesse Burton, an energy policy researcher at UCT.
Utility scale renewables, I mean, you're looking at 12 to 18 months for a large renewables solar PV plant, probably 24 months for a wind plant. That's much faster than a new coal-fired power plant, which will take longer than that just to get through the environmental licensing probably.
Would there be enough power?
We sit at a peak demand of around 32 gigawatts, so we'll be losing 12 gigawatts of that over the next 10 years in coal plants that are retiring. And the big question then is, how do you replace them and with what do you replace them? And I think the really important thing is that we can deliver stable and reliable electricity with very high levels of renewable energy.
Wouldn't it be too expensive?
Fundamentally, every single robust analysis in the country agrees that a least cost future for South Africa, so a power system that is going to minimize costs for users, is primarily wind and solar and flexible capacity. And that flexible capacity can come from some gas or some batteries or some diesel or pumped storage.
But who were these research groups? Were they credible?
I want names!
Internationally, you have a wide array of people who do work on South Africa, Blunt University, a US-based professor at Stanford, the International Energy Agency, Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Then locally in South Africa, the Center for Scientific and Industrial Research, my group at the University of Cape Town, the Energy Systems Research Group, then the DMRE also, and Eskom do similar kinds of energy planning.
But what about storage?
It's about having all the right ingredients to have a stable and reliable power system. So batteries and gas are more expensive than maybe just the power out of a coal plant. But because renewables are so cheap, it's the combination of all of those ingredients going forward.
Dude, I almost had you.
In fact, the country's renewable energy program, the REI4P, has no shortage of interested investors and companies looking to build solar and wind farms.
Shut up and take my money!
Meaning that we don't have to risk the country's finances on Eskom-led power plants.
Eskom has made a net loss of 20.5 billion rand in the financial year which ended in March.
The risks sit with the project developers and not the taxpayer. It sounds too good to be true. Timely, reliable and affordable clean energy that doesn't have to be generated by Eskom?
I don't believe you. Continue.
So if this is such a slam dunk, why aren't we pushing this forward? While South Africa's renewable energy program was praised around the world, it stalled between 2015 and 2018 due to what can only be described as a lack of political will.
Mineral Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe says it's not an obstacle to independent power producers, but says they're the most expensive form of electricity generation.
The game changer in this plan is going to be gas. That is where we should invest a lot of money.
Every single robust analysis in the country agrees that a least cost future for South Africa is primarily wind and solar.
But never forget, to Mantashe is to abruptly change one's mind. And sure enough, there are signs that the program is getting back on track.
We are accelerating the implementation of the integrated resource plan to provide a substantial increase in the contribution of renewable energy sources, battery storage, and gas technology.
Just recently, Mantashe finally amended our electricity regulations so that municipalities will be able to procure their own electricity. Of course, there will be challenges, so we spoke to Meg Davies from Stellenbosch University to learn more about what a just transition to a renewable energy might look like. To illustrate this, Meg used Mpumalanga and coal miners as a starting point.
So for example, if we think about Mpumalanga, we need to have a very clear strategy for how power stations are going to be decommissioned, and we need some creative ideas that come up from how we repurpose those power stations in ways that animate new economic and new green industrial opportunities. And that's where thinking around the Green New Deal becomes really exciting, because we're able to connect what might become quite like ghost towns and quite depressed economic spaces to revitalize those with renewable energy infrastructure that could enable a whole host of other kinds of industries.
So how do renewable energy jobs stack up against coal? Aside from coal becoming unprofitable,
over 600 miners were laid off, 100 facing retrenchment,
provisional liquidation,
7 million rand losses.
There are at least 30% more jobs in solar and wind when compared to coal.
As we contract the coal sector, we could enable supportive mechanisms, for example, early retirement. We could have skilling for workers coming out of the coal-based sector to move into green jobs. And there are a number of examples of strategies that have been taken across the world in other countries that have initiated coal phase-out strategies to do that. We would end up needing to relocate a number of communities and families that have made their lives around these, for example, coal-based power station where their family lives and works. And so it will be compensation, relocation, reskilling, and also regional development. We need to think about economic development strategies for the local municipalities where these power stations are located.
And Anja Berretta from the Konrad Adenauer Foundation showed us what South Africa could learn from other African countries.
There has been a remarkable success over the last years. The use of renewable energy has almost doubled on the continent. There has been a success, I think, in introducing more market-based mechanisms in competition for off-grid solutions and making it easier for private enterprises to access the market. So, for example, Senegal, they have increased the use of solar energy within 6 years, to the extent that today solar energy is 25% of all renewable energy. And 6 years ago it was non-existent.
And Ghana is doing more than producing world-class coffin dancers.
Ghana as well, they have introduced a large package or a national strategy that really tackles a lot of aspects, not only the electricity, but because electricity is cross-cutting, as we have seen over the past months, has especially an influence on the health sector. So I think it really is important to have the policy framework that enables investment, because we do need private investment. I mean, there's no way around it.
In many ways, COVID-19 has shown us what our future could look like if we don't improve the resiliency of our systems, economies, and communities. In future, we will look back on this moment as the time to have been bold and decisive, to rebuild our economy quickly, affordably, and sustainably. Let's not have any regrets. Stay safe and stay away. Thanks for watching. Thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe for the next episode. See you next time.